Welcome, everybody. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions, where we have a mission to change the world one brave word at a time. And here today to help me do that is Katy Jo Holton. She is the founder of Holton Healing Arts Shaman School and has 15 years experience creating unique, intuitive sessions for her clients. Her psychic skills guide you through connecting to your own inner knowing so you can heal your past, live with purpose, and integrate spirituality with all aspects of your life. Welcome, Katy Jo.
Hi, thank you.
So you don't know this, but I have been craving to have the shaman conversation for a really long time. So this is so perfect. So first, just share your story. Like, how did you get to doing what you're doing today?
Sure. So let me try to be somewhat concise. Definitely had a lot of experience. I was always interested in spirituality, even as a young person. So I spent a lot of time playing around with East Asian philosophy. And when I was younger, I was doing some studying and researching on dreams. And in the book that I was reading, they referenced a shaman from a medical facility in Arizona. And I was like, what is that? So I looked it up the earlier days in the Google world and found a workshop and kind of just jumped in because I was so curious. So what really stuck out for me is having spent a lot of time in the East Asian philosophy and meditation and that world, which was beautiful and wonderful and a great tool that I still use. But I was missing a lot of the like human stuff. And so kind of opening the door to the shaman world made me see, well, one, there's a lot of stuff that I already do that I was, not conscious of. And two, it's a little bit more of a feminine way to do spirituality, where, meditation again has great benefits, and is very masculine, like sit and stare at a wall for 10 hours in silence, right? And then with the shamanic practice with journeying and drumming and dancing and movement and that kind of thing. So I dove into that, and I spent quite a few years just for my own personal pleasure exploring that and exploring my capacities in there. And then doing healing work, never really forward, just kind of on the side. It was like word of mouth, or people would want help with something. And so I'd let them come over and do the thing. And so it wasn't really until a few years ago that I, really began to acknowledge that this was something that I deeply wanted to do and be and bring forward and have it be the main part of my life rather than like a little side hobby. And really what happened was just giving myself permission to bring it forward, and some of the inner work that went along with all of that, and learning, what it is that I really want to help people with and what I'm good at, and kind of saying yes to that. And then from there, it's been accelerating, faster and faster as I go. And it's been, really beautiful to be able to work with people in this way. But it really started just from being young, your childhood experience of the way we interact in the world, and kind of always keeping that sort of close to me, until it was like, what, actually, I don't want this to be a tucked away thing. I actually think that I want this to be part of my life, my everyday life, my ordinary life. So that's kind of my backstory.
Well, all right. I'm going to get back around to that giving yourself permission thing in just a second, because we could talk for a really long time about that one thing. But so with our recent book projects that we've been working on, I seriously have met more shamans in the last year than I have in my entire life. And I want to understand the title a little bit better. So who can be a shaman?
Sure. So great question, and complex too. So there are different opinions on what this means. To me, at the most basic level, um, shamans interact with the unseen energetics of things, and for the purpose of restoring harmony. So that would be kind of your most fundamental bullet point explanation. Then from there, you can have people that have different specialties, or people that are from a lineage. So you might be from a lineage and only certain people are allowed to be shamans. The way I see it actually, though, is that this is a capacity that we all have, kind of like being psychic. Like it's just a sixth sense. It's a survival mechanism. It's a human capacity. And some of us just come into the world maybe more gifted in that naturally, but it's also something that can be developed. And so, a lot of us kind of tune into the shaman in us when we're reading the energy of a room, for example. And it usually is subconscious. So little things like noticing the energy is kind of getting dead or low and being able to sort of crack that joke that opens everything right back up, or being able to ask somebody a question that brings them deeper into their knowing, right? And then, so this is kind of the main energetics of it. And with any other sort of career or modality, you're also going to have people that are beginning with that learning and are at the newer part of learning how to use those capacities, and people that are highly experienced. So there's a big spectrum, and there's no like for sure this is when you make it or this is what you need to do to check the box. It's a constant growing thing that we learn to do and build on year after year, and really a personal self-mastery journey mixed with tuning into the greater whole and trying to restore the harmony there. So so essentially anybody can be, if they are interested in doing that and taking a look at themselves and opening up that capacity in them.
I like what you said about personal self-mastery journey, and there are so many paths one can take to that outcome. And so maybe the shaman school is a path. I know you're making me think of my martial arts journey. And this is a lifelong practice is what it is, and you can do it in different kinds of ways. But I like hearing you talk about it. Can we go back to that? You finally just gave yourself permission. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit more about what happened when you cracked that open. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, interestingly enough, it's like a good thing, but it took a while for me to realize that this was sort of a piece that was holding me back, was like hyper focus on ethics. And so being a conscious individual, you always want to do the right thing and you want to make sure you're not harming anybody. And especially, focused on normal people living ordinary lives that are, maybe trying to start a business or something like that. We get kind of focused on like the underdog and that being important. And then we're all rooting for the underdog to like make it. But this happens a lot with small business, right? So we have like a small business and we know somebody and we're really excited for them to make it. And then they do, and they start being abundant and they get out there and we kind of secretly hate them for it, So I realized the ethics was sort of a place that I was holding myself back there with like, oh, well, it wouldn't be good to make money doing this thing. Or if I were to get out there and be more forward with it, then it would look like I just want attention and all of these things that we go through in almost any field, not just in healing arts. And so, but what I also knew is that I was, very good at this. This was like a genius of mine. And so knowing that, and then also seeing all these pieces that were blocking that permission, was kind of the piece where it's like, okay, actually, now that I see that this is like a way of putting the brakes on so that I'm not being more forward, like even that awareness in and of itself kind of allowed some of that to slowly sort of lift back so that I could move forward slowly, right, at my own pace. And I still see that sometimes, each layer that I go in, and as I come more forward, there usually is sort of a new permission block where it's like, okay, I have to be aware that this thing is coming up and all it's doing is being like, are you sure you want to do this? And I can check in with myself. Am I sure I want to do this? Figure out what I need to do to be sure, and then clear it. And then, allow myself to give myself permission to move forward on the next step again.
I love how you're sharing your awareness process there. Awareness is everything. I mean, awareness is the magic. And I love how you said in that moment, I had the awareness, right? So if you guys are listening, that's it. Like all of those moments that you have when you have the awareness of what you're thinking, of what you're doing, of how you're behaving, then there's the opportunity. Oh my goodness. Okay. So this crazy question just came to me, and I'm looking at your wall behind you, and that's part of why I'm going to ask it to you. But it was also the photo that you sent me. So like, I think a lot of people think of shamans, shamanic priestesses. I've heard that term, shamanism, all of those words. They think of rattles and drums and dancing and chanting, and they're not so sure about that. So talk about that for a minute.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So fun. So here we go. We have a spectrum with this as well. And so, like, one of the ways that we work, especially with the awareness piece, is, we learn to explore a certain part of ourselves. So we sort of like take it out so we can feel what it's like to do this thing and make it conscious. And then after it's become conscious, we can sort of put it back in. So with the drums and the rattles and the dancing and the singing, there's a part of us that, this is the part of us that's just feels at home on the earth. It's like the wild child in us. It's just a natural capacity, again, that we have. And also, you don't have to do that to do shamanism, right? So that's one end of the spectrum. And with any spirituality, right? You can, put on the robes, you can put on the feathers, you can put on the adornments and say the weird things and do the things and be as woo as you want. And that's cool. That's part of, again, the process of like exploring parts of your capacity and who you are and being comfortable with it and giving yourself permission to be for that part of you to come out. And that's not necessarily what it is. So also on the other end of the spectrum, shamanism and shamanic healing can be very subtle. And when it's done, when you've trained and worked with it for a long time, probably other people won't know that anything is happening or you're doing a thing, right? And also, as you get comfortable with yourself, you also don't need people to know that you're doing a thing, right? So that's kind of the spectrum. And usually, when we get called to something like this, whether it's shamanism, martial arts, lots of different modalities have this, you kind of come in on one end of the spectrum and are being called to the other end of the spectrum so that you can become more whole, so that there's not a part of yourself that you're shutting down or making wrong or uncomfortable with. You get to explore that, play in that, and then pick, where you want to fall in the center of all of it. Yeah.
The journey to wholeness. I'm writing a lot of notes and it's how I process, but you're also making me think of the earth, of energy, holistic, and just a mini light bulb is going on. And I said it earlier, people love to label things and then they hear a new label and they don't know what that means all of a sudden, when really they know what it means. It's just somebody calling this thing something else, something different that they hadn't heard the label before. So I want you all to know that, first of all, this world can seem out there. And I don't like the term woo woo, because the magic is palpable and real. The results and the transformation is the greatest word, is real. So part of my mission of bringing people like Katy Jo here to the podcast is to have you understand a little bit more and hear the language and hear somebody different talk about it in whatever way they do, right? We need to hear it in all the ways. So I thank you for doing that so wonderfully about the rattles and the drums. So part of what you do is help people listen to those inner nudges. And I call this like the language of my soul, right? So tell me about how you do that and how you teach people to do it and how it creates more ease in life.
Yeah. To pick up on that thread of sort of wanting to like explore or, make clear how this process works. A lot of times, again, it is very subtle. So we can go and do the drumming thing and like channel and get out there. But most of the time, what we're really just doing is practicing tuning into our awareness.
Can I back you up for a second?
Sure.
Is the use of the instruments for the purpose of channeling easier, better?
It can be. So two quick answers to that. One, movement. So like singing and drumming and dancing in and of itself helps us get out of our mind and into our body. So then, we can kind of access this intuitive layer a little bit easier and move from the thinking mind into the knowing, right? And same thing with the drumming. Like the quick answer is, within shamanic traditions, like drumming is tuning into the heartbeat of the earth and mapping our journey. But also, like according, if it was science, they would say, well, the repetitive beat helps us move into the theta wave state of the brain,
Yep.
which helps us access this intuitive thing. So here again, there's the spectrum. Like both are true. It's not like one makes the other not true. And where do you want to fall and what works best for you to access this state? And also, it's like a stepping stone. So we use that as a practice to get good at accessing that state and tuning into our awareness. And then once we have the pattern of how to do that, we don't need to do that every time. We don't, when we can, it can be helpful to drum and dance for 30 minutes before you tune into your awareness, but you don't need to, it's not required in order for you to access information quickly.
I love that. Yes, I totally get it. Okay, so I paused you right when you were beginning to talk about guiding people to the inner nudges.
Mm-hmm.
What else do you want to say about that?
Sure. So most of the time we have that inner nudge, the knowing or like the deeper awareness right there at the surface, but we skip over it. So really almost anything that you are thinking or that crosses your awareness also on some level is true. So we can access things like a past life in an instant when it passes our awareness, or we can access things like our inner child in a second when a memory comes through. And so I do have a story about like the awareness and the inner knowing and how it can help bring ease. So actually a few weeks ago I was hosting a retreat, a workshop, and I woke up Friday morning. It was like 6 a.m. I woke up and I had this like huge pain in my shoulder. Like, oh my God, this is killing me. And I usually don't have a lot of body aches. So I was kind of like, oh shoot, like this is something that I actually might need to get some help with this today, because I'm not sure I can do this whole workshop all weekend with this huge pain. So I had a friend of a friend that I've been meaning to connect with, who's a massage therapist, but I haven't actually met her yet. And so it crossed my awareness, like she popped into my head right away. I was like, no, that's crazy. It's like 6 a.m. Like it's Friday. She's probably like out camping somewhere anyway, like all these things for why I shouldn't contact her. And so then it was like, well, I'll look up a clinic and see if I can squeeze in an appointment today. And long story short is, even though it didn't make sense to contact her, I did. And then like last minute, she hit me up and she was like, I actually can squeeze you in. I only have this 30-minute window. But if you can come now, then I think I can really help you. And that 30 minutes will make a big difference for you. So I rushed around, got all my stuff together, piled it in the car, started heading to her place. Her place ended up being like 3 houses down from the workshop center. Right. While I was there, she was actually had a friend that was coming over that needed a ride. So the massage therapist actually was into this work and was interested in building a retreat center to host the kind of work that I do. And then her friend that came over who needed a ride was also interested in this work. So it was sort of like kind of picked up a client in the process and, and like also introduced me to somebody else. Long story short, I ended up giving her a friend a ride to where she was going. I was waiting on the workshop center to open up so I could get it all set up. And so I was in town early. And after I dropped her friend off, I rolled up into town. And as soon as I got to town, I got a text from the homeowner that said it's available. You can move in early. So I was able to drive straight to the house and set up my things, and all because of my shoulder, right? And so that was like a little inner nudge. That's like
magic.
when I wake up, it was like, oh, I just thought of that woman right away. And everything rational was like, don't contact her. My insurance could pay for the place if I go to the clinic. This would be out of pocket, blah, 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 blah. And also like tuning into that first piece, that first layer of my awareness allowed all of these other things to unfold in such a effortless way.
I like that a lot. I'm always trying to help people with ways to up level the listening. And you gave me one today. I've experienced exactly what you're talking about, but sometimes it's so easy to skip over into the inner critic stuff that follows that first nudge. Right. But you're helping me with when you recognize the pattern, then you can begin to just get better at this and understand, ooh, it was that first thought I had. I'm going to go back to that for a minute and follow that nudge. I love that.
Did you have that experience today?
Well, no, I just have had it so many times in the past. If I'm listening and I'm following that, what that first thought was. But your key for me today was you have to listen to the first one. If
Mhm.
you wait too long, then it gets piled on by the other stuff, and then you don't know what to listen to anymore, right? Yeah. Okay, so there's one more topic I want to ask you about, and that is dealing with, and you talk about this, so I'm curious to know what you want to say about this, but dealing with the critics, dealing with the judgment, I mean, in general, but also as people who play bigger and publish books and blogs and all the things that you and I do. But that can be a huge challenge, especially when you're out there playing bigger in the world. Talk to me about this. How can we deal with this better?
Yeah. Yeah, that path is can be so challenging. And especially if you're doing something in the creative field where everybody has an opinion. And oftentimes, honestly, oftentimes their opinion is formed more out of wanting to be like you than because they actually think that you're wrong, right? So, kind of going back to the whole piece with the permission and ethics, one thing that I noticed, I'm going to use the money story to sort of illustrate this, I guess. So, we're used to things being linear, but of course, everything is a circle. And so at one point on the circle of my money story, I was in the place of like having money is bad. And, if you're affluent, then you don't care about other people and all of the things, right? And meanwhile, I was really heavy into exploring spirituality and inner knowing and personal development and growth, and hyper focused on all of that. And then it was like, okay, so now I'm in that spot. And so there's a way that you can look at the people across the circle. And for me at that time, that was like corporate America, 60 hours a week, throwing everything that matters away in exchange for money. So there's a way that you can look across the circle and be like, that's bad, right? You've got it all wrong. And meanwhile, those people most likely are looking across the circle at someone like me and being like, you've got it all wrong, get it together, right? And then as we move around the circle, then I find myself in this place where it's like, oh, like actually, I have this, highly developed skill that I'm bringing forward, and and I'm ready to receive money and compensation for it for this thing that I've developed. And so here I am, now being in a position to, earn an income here, and folks that have been putting a lot of time and energy into earning income and ignoring their spirituality are now on the other side of the circle being like, oh, I really want to understand all of these things that are happening to me.
Mm.
And it feels like there's meaning here, and just wanting some guidance in interpreting their spiritual exploration. And also they have an exchange that they can give to me, right? And so the same thing is true with the judgment when we're putting creative works out there, when we're advertising. Almost at any point, like one thing that I get a lot is people that are like, oh, it's really important, spirituality is really important, so you shouldn't charge for it. And it's like, okay, I get it, I've been on that side of the circle, like, but I've been there before, so I can see where you are and why you're feeling that way. And also, it's not completely wrong either, it's just that you're on the other side of the circle right now. And so that kind of just allows me to bring in some compassion. So it's not a like who's right and who's wrong, but I've been there, so I understand what you're saying, and so I can stay in myself and not feel like I need to modify what I'm doing to accommodate the critics. Um, you know, Even with I remember talking with a friend coach of mine when I first started advertising, and it was like, whoa, people got a lot of things that they have to say about what you're doing. And also I was really sensitive. I was really concerned about the way that it would appear, and really careful around the appropriation piece and all of these things. And also she was like, well, her first advertising was as a creativity coach, and so people just tore it apart. And for me, I'm like, oh, that doesn't matter, like you can coach creativity. But that was so close to her that it was, that it kind of created this space of like, oh, maybe I am doing something wrong. But again, here's that, like, you can see the other side of the circle. and be able to say, okay, well, I see where you're coming from and what you're doing, and also that's not true. It's not truth. And just give yourself permission to let other people not be okay with where you are, because that's the journey that they're on too, and they'll probably come around to where you are at some point. You know?
Love that. Love that perspective. Perspective changes everything. Perspective is part of the awareness that we started talking about. And that's can be a magical process if you can wake up in the moment and understand you're in the circle. I love
Mhm.
that different way to think about that and just looking across. And I also loved what you said about it doesn't matter what they're saying about what you're doing. It doesn't mean you have to react or respond. But you, it's all about just sitting still in the awareness and what you're feeling and what they're saying. But then not, you don't have to change what you're doing. You don't have to modify. You don't have to follow their rules or whatever. It's just really about understanding the awareness piece.
You don't even have to explain yourself,
Exactly.
which is hard. It's tempting because we want to. We want to be like, oh, well, this is why I'm doing the thing, or I've learned all of these things about the thing, which is why it's okay to do the thing now. And sometimes I think that's a piece that we work is like just being in the okay, you can disapprove of me. It's fine. I don't
Yeah.
need to explain myself. I know who I am and what I'm doing.
So, speaking of promoting what you do, tell everyone a little bit more about what you have going on right now. What are the services that you offer?
Sure, yeah. So my primary offering is Shaman School. So this is a online program for the most part. It's about 6 months, and really, what I help people do is, especially people that are already in tune with some of their spiritual gifts, or maybe have had some pretty strong spiritual experiences recently. I help you understand how to maximize and use those gifts to create a strong healing practice, whether you want to do it professionally or not, right? So some of us are wanting to be direct and offer this as our life's work. And some of us, just want to help bring harmony into, our crazy workplace or our community or our family. And so, I help you work through your own healing story and trauma, and we go deep with that kind of stuff. And in that process, bring out your inner knowing and help you understand sort of like your unique medicine or magic or purpose based on where you've been so that you can understand how to use your spiritual gifts in the deepest way to help people in the deepest way. And so the process is pretty playful at the same time, and we work in groups. So if you're actually a practitioner and wanting to do this directly and have a direct offer, you get a lot of practice getting in there with the work. So a lot of programs will tell you how to do a thing, or even books can tell you how to do a thing, but then you don't actually get practice and experience doing it. And so there's sort of this like hesitancy to bring your work forward because it's like, well, I've never actually done this to a person, or I've only done it to my best friend or something like that. And so there's like a lot of, there's sort of a lot of doubt around how to use your gifts in the most powerful way. And so this is one of the pieces that I really help practitioners work so that they can come forward with a lot more confidence and, know how to deliver the best medicine.
Nice. All right, you guys. So I'm sure you are interested in what these offerings are. And of course, if you just drop down a little bit after the show into those show notes, you're going to find holtonhealingarts.com, which is where you can explore, take that next step into Katy Jo's world and understand about her shaman school. And I can't wait to hear what you find and what happens on your journey there. So, any final message to our listeners about this amazing journey that we are all on?
My favorite thing is just trust yourself and keep on trusting and trust deeper and trust deeper and keep on trusting.
Really great last words. Katy Jo, thank you so much for what you're doing in the world and for being here today to share it with us.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
So, listeners, make sure to drop down into the show notes, find the links, okay? Take that next step and explore all the awesomeness that Katy Jo is up to. If you are ready to share your brave words in a bigger way, please find information about our book publishing and collaborative book projects at bravehealer.com. And lastly, today, you guys remember, you were born, so you are worthy. Your message matters. What if the thing you're still a little afraid to share is exactly what someone needs to hear to change or even save their life? It's time to be brave. See you next time, everybody.